All right, hello terminal students and welcome. In this session, we're going to build a really powerful toolkit for your AMC studies. We're going to give you the essential concepts you need to look critically at all the media that's constantly shaping how we see the world. So let's kick things off with this really profound idea from the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And it's a pretty radical starting point, right? He's saying that the only universe that exists is the human one, the one we perceive. I want you to hold on to this quote because honestly, it's the key that unlocks everything we're going to talk about today. Okay, so where does this all fit in with your AMC curriculum? Well, it's a perfect fit. We're diving deep into theme 3, relations au monde, and we're zeroing in on the axis regard sur le monde. Basically, our mission today is to figure out how media, all those images and stories we see, actually build our picture of the world. This is a huge skill for the back, by the way. So with that in mind, let's get to our big question. So here it is. This is the question that's going to guide us through this entire session. And the distinction here is absolutely crucial. So often we think of media as just a mirror, right? Something that just shows us what's happening. But we're going to challenge that. We're going to start seeing it as a lens, a powerful one that doesn't just reflect reality, it actively builds it for us. Okay, so here's the game plan. We're going to look at 3 different lenses for analysis: subjectivity, context, and algorithms. Then, and this is the important part, we'll turn all that theory into a practical method you can actually use in your exams, and we'll wrap it all up with a solid critical perspective. Sound good? Let's go. All right, first up, the subjective view. This one is all about the human element. It's about recognizing that in every piece of media, there's an individual perspective, and you just can't get away from that. So, what do we actually mean by subjectivity? Well, it's way more than just someone's opinion. Think of it as this complex mix of our identity, our consciousness. It even gets into some pretty deep philosophical stuff like epistemology, which is all about how we know things, and ontology, the very nature of reality. But to put it simply, it's the unique lens that every single person looks through. Okay, so in journalism, this subjectivity thing shows up in 2 main ways. On one hand, you've got byline subjectivity. That's literally the journalist's voice coming through. Their thoughts, their reflections. You see this a lot in commentary or reportage. But then there's source subjectivity, which is maybe even more powerful. This is when they use a real person's story, like a local citizen's reaction to some new policy, to make a big, abstract issue hit home. And why is this source subjectivity so effective? Well, this classic theory from Galton and Rouge kind of nails it. A lot of our news culture is built on this idea of individualism, that man is the master of his own destiny. We love stories about individuals. So, and this is the key takeaway. When a journalist decides to tell a big story through one person's eyes, that's not just a random choice. It's an ideological one. It's a choice that taps right into that cultural belief. Okay, so we've got subjectivity down. But that's only part of the puzzle. Now let's move to our second ones, the power of context. Because here's the thing. Those individual views, they never just float in empty space. Context is everything. Where you see something, when you see it, it can completely change what it means. This idea brings us to a really cool theory called semiopragmatics. Sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. It says that meaning isn't something that's just in a film or an article, waiting for you to find it. No, meaning gets created in the moment you're watching or reading it. It's an interaction between the thing itself, you, and the context you're in. It makes you ask questions like, wait, what are the rules of TikTok? Or does it matter that I'm watching this on my phone instead of in a cinema? And this quote just sums it up perfectly. Context basically sets the rules for how we make sense of things. I mean, think about it. You see a video on TikTok. You read it in a completely different way than if you saw that exact same clip in a movie theater, right? The context completely transforms the meaning. Odin's model actually shows us how this works. You've got a sender who makes a text. That text turns into physical stuff, light waves, sound waves. But here's the cool part. When the receiver gets those vibrations, they're not just a passive sponge. They actively transform them into a brand new interpreted text. Let's call it T prime. So with our TikTok example, the light and sound are the same, but the receiver's context, being on that platform, creates a totally different meaning. So communication isn't just sending a packet from A to B, it's a transformation. All right, for our third and final lens, we're jumping straight into the world we live in right now. We're moving away from just the human and the contextual and looking at something huge, systemic, and a lot of the time totally invisible: algorithmic gatekeepers. So back in the day, the theory of gatekeeping was simple. You had a human editor, they even had a nickname for him, Mr. Dates, and he decided what went in the newspaper and what didn't. He was the gatekeeper.
Well, today, that job has been taken over by code. Algorithmic gatekeeping is all about how these automated AI-driven systems are now the ones choosing what news we see, what gets pushed to the top, and what gets buried.
And this timeline really shows you how dramatically things have changed. You go from one guy, Mr. Gates, making a call in the 1950s, to the early days of social media where your friends were the curators, to right now where AI is making millions of these gatekeeping decisions every second, all around the world. The scale and speed are just mind-boggling. And this right here, this comparison is probably one of the most important things for you to grasp for your analysis. Think about the questions they ask. A journalist is supposed to ask, is this important for the public? Is it fair? An algorithm asks a totally different set of questions. Will people click on this? Will they share it? Will it keep them scrolling? And you can see how that creates a huge tension between what's good for society and what's just clickable. Okay, so we've got our three lenses. Theory's great, but now let's get practical. How do you actually use this stuff? This next part is all about methodology, about turning these ideas into a solid analysis for your exams. This is it. This three-step formula is your secret weapon. For every single point you make, I want you to remember idea, example, explanation. First, tell me your idea. For instance, the article uses source subjectivity. Great. Now, give me an example. By quoting a specific citizen. Perfect. Finally, explain it. This makes the policy feel personal and creates a sense of public anger. See? Idea, example, explanation. Do that and your paragraphs will be clear, structured, and impossible to argue with. Now, if you really want to level up your analysis, you've got to use the right language. Sprinkling in these key terms, words like representation, framing, gatekeeping, shows that you're not just giving an opinion, you have a real, sophisticated grasp of these concepts. All right, let's bring it all home. We're going to pull our three lenses together now, subjectivity, context, and gatekeeping, and use them to finally answer that big question we started with. So here's the bottom line. Media is not a mirror. It is a construction site. It actively builds our reality brick by brick. It does this by choosing whose story to tell, by placing that story in a context that tells us how to feel about it, and by filtering it through gates that decide if we even see it at all. And your job as a critical thinker is to be the person who can see how it's all being built. And that leaves us with one last, massive question to think about. Okay, so media builds our world. So what? What are the consequences? How does that shape who we are, our identity? And maybe even bigger, how does it affect our ability to faire société, to build a society together? This question, as you can see, ties directly into other big themes in your AMC program. It's a huge thing to think about, and it really gets to the heart of why all of this matters.